the follow through, how to act on your goals. Claire is an educator, author, and founder of Ladies Get Paid, a global community that champions the professional and financial advancement of women. She is also the producer and host of John Hancock's podcast, Friends Who Talk About Money. Claire has traveled the country teaching thousands of women how to negotiate millions of dollars in raises, start businesses, and advocate for themselves in the workplace. Claire was named one of Entrepreneur Magazine's 100 Most Powerful Women and is a highly sought after expert for Fortune 500 companies working to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging within their organizations. Thank you for joining us today. Claire will be joined in conversations by Amy, who is Power to Fly's head of customer success. So thank you both for joining us. I'm going to pass the mic to both of you all, and I look forward to taking notes for today's conversation.
Thank you so much, Mariella, and thank you so much, Claire, again, for being here. It's so wonderful to have a chance to speak with you and learn from you. And I know we only have 30 minutes, so I don't want to get started any later than we have to. My first question for you, Claire, is as a founder, a speaker, an author, it's very obvious that you know how to get things done. I think even the introduction that Mariella just gave makes that very obvious. But to start, could you just tell us a little bit more about the Ladies Get Paid community and why you ultimately decided to start it?
Ooh, sexism. Yes. Thanks for having me. Anybody who's asked to kind of give the backstory on why they, have started something, it's like, how much time do you have? It's like many years leading up to what eventually would become Ladies Get Paid. But there was a series of aha moments, starting with a pretty sexist one. This was in 2015. I worked for a company called workingnotworking.com. So a professional network of people connected for work, mostly freelancers based on their availability in tech design and advertising. And I go to this event, this very fancy event in the south of France. We were there to find clients. And this older guy comes up to me, sticks out his hand, and he says, "Well, hi, now, whose wife are you?" It was like, well, certainly not yours. Here's the thing, didn't say that. We needed clients. All week, I had interactions like this where I was just not being taken seriously, oftentimes objectified. And I had to consistently navigate this like icky gender power dynamic to get the conversation to a place that was where, again, business, we were looking for business. And I remember it was really profound going into the ladies' room, kind of escaping, to be honest. So many women were in there and they were all exchanging business cards. And this feeling of like, oh, this is a refuge. Like, let's put aside the sort of bullshit out there and like, we can get things done here. And that really stuck with me. And fast forward a week after, that experience, I just wrote a little essay around trying to process my place in these uncomfortable power dynamics, because I really wondered if I caused them. A lot of times women do that. Right? If I was being objectified, was my skirt too short, etc. And it was sharing that essay actually that made me realize there was something here. I didn't feel comfortable publishing it, but I did send it to a couple of friends who then wrote me back and said this was something that they'd also experienced, and if they could share it with their friends. And all of a sudden, my essay sort of going viral in my inbox. And I do want to just underscore again, 2015, we were not talking about Me Too then. Okay. So this felt kind of like a big deal to be very transparent about uncomfortable, again, I keep saying uncomfortable power dynamics and beyond. And long story short, ended up researching women in the workplace, equality, wage gap, these things that, again, now we talk about 2015, it was kind of shocking to uncover some really, really bad statistics around women in the workplace and how far away we are from gender parity. Now, really long story short, 1 year later was when I started Ladies Get Paid. It was because a friend came to me and said she didn't realize that she was undercharging herself, that her male counterparts, art director friends, they were charging way more. And was there anything, that I could do and help? And I was in a position at the time having, working for this recruitment service. I was director of marketing. My aha moment was, let's bring everybody together to talk about money, because that, is a way that we can at least figure out how to close our own wage gap. Those statistics, systemic, structural, overwhelming. But as individuals, was there anything that we can do, right? Like, what's that next possible step? And it became very clear out of that event that I hosted for women to come and talk about money, that salary negotiation, that was a place to begin. And it wasn't like I walked out of that event thinking, here's ladies get paid. All I could think of was, well, let's create a Slack group so at least people can still stay connected, between now and the next time I host an event, if I even host an event. And so I know we're talking about goal setting and, we'll get into some other things, but I would say the through line from like the beginning of Ladies Get Paid to our conversation today is everything has been, what is the next possible step? Yes, of course, thinking big vision, but that's overwhelming. So you always got to go to the basics of like, what can I do to help somebody else just take that one next step so that we can gain momentum? Otherwise, again, like I said, it's just overwhelming.
100%. And, thank you for sharing that. I think, like, sadly, to your point, it's far too common to hear these sorts of tales that are coming, stories that come from women in the workplace. And all of those things that you talk about, they're so deeply embedded that I think it's really incredible that you started this business and that you have sort of been able to really equip women with the understanding of how to best have these conversations around goal setting, around salary. Yeah. Getting a little bit more into the goal setting sort of purpose of this talk, where are you headed? What do you want to achieve? Can you tell me a little bit about like where knowing your purpose or knowing your why really fits into the goal setting and where you're trying to head? What exactly does that piece lay the foundation for, knowing your why?
Sure. Yeah, I think oftentimes it's a step that gets skipped. And then we find ourselves unmotivated or overwhelmed, and we don't know where it's our compass. Like it is the place to continually come back to. Let me just tell a quick story about how I forgot a little bit about my why, and then how it completely changed what I was doing when I refocused. So as I was writing my book, Ladies Get Paid, if you can't tell, I'm trying to sell the book. So ladiesgetpaid.com/book. I'm writing this book a year ago, my first time writing a book, and I suffered from the most crippling imposter syndrome and perfectionism I have ever experienced. And I am somebody who definitely has that. Of course, it was very ironic because I'm, writing a chapter on this stuff as I'm experiencing it. And my aha moment here was I was focusing on things that were really kind of, I guess I would say, outside of my control. I don't like the word control, but hear me out for a second. I was focusing on, is this book going to get on a bestseller? Is my editor going to like this book? Am I going to get canceled? Okay. I lived in utter fear, right? What are other people going to think? Will they like this? I have no say in that. I really don't. So then I shifted to two things that really, really helped me get focused again, because I was like spinning my wheels here. It was, okay, why am I actually writing this? Not because I have a deadline or I have an advance or any of that. Like, who am I writing this for? Imagining that person literally opening up the book and looking at the page, like picturing her. By the way, it's a quote, a little bit easier for me to do this because I have mission-driven work, but anybody out there, just even imagining how the work that you do is going to impact somebody on your team and how that's going to impact the customer, no matter what the experience is. Like, imagine the real person, experiencing or participating in this thing that you create, right? Who am I doing this for? What do I want her to feel out of this? Okay. That was a huge focus shift. And then the other one was, what can I do that will really help me? Okay. So forget about her for a second, helping her. What's going to help me? Well, what's going to help me is, can I learn how to write in the moment? Like, can I practice being present? Can I challenge myself to feel joy as I'm writing? And things like, can I challenge myself to handwrite this? Right. So I think the through line here is I'm going from something that is really just external, related to how, to judgment. Okay. And breaking it down into its smallest common denominator that I do have some kind of say over, agency over. And that was helpful. It's something I still struggle with. I mean, this isn't like one or done. Again, you can imagine, Ladies Get Paid. Of course, the why is always there. Well, it's easy to forget it though. And I've had to, as during the pandemic, especially since, everything we'd done before was in person. When you no longer can connect in person, then how else are you going to remind yourself of the why? And so it's not just, telling yourself. Sometimes you need to have things set up to do that. And for me, it's copying and pasting or screenshotting anytime somebody sends me something really lovely about how I impacted them. So it's also, figuring out like, what is a way that you can have something easily at your disposal to remind yourself of that why. And that's going to, it's going to require work, but good work.
I mean, I love everything that you just said. It's so true how it can be like very overwhelming when you're thinking about all those external factors that are leading you to do something versus like remembering why you started it. So thank you so much for that deep dive, and also for sort of the vulnerability, right? And someone like yourself also facing the same sort of questions or challenges that, a lot of women do face, whether it's at work or just trying to really work on something that they feel is important, such as writing a book. So I think that's really powerful to share.
One thing I wanted to mention is, so my why had always been shifting. So I'll tell you why, but my why had always been anger. Okay. Anger around these statistics that I read, right, around the wage gap. And this anger, it's been fuel, right? I mean, it's been channeled into a place that's productive. But then I got tired. Okay. So my why, it has still been, anger around these statistics, but with everything that's going on, for me to continually be fueled by a negative emotion is not good for my emotional stability. Okay. It worked in the beginning of Ladies Get Paid, starting around 2016, especially also with the presidential election. Like, there was a lot of energy that we were all riding off of. That has not been sustainable for me. So it's very interesting, because sometimes your why is not what you should always be focusing on if it's not working for you. Oh, like I'm not articulating well because I'm still in the midst of figuring it out, but it's sort of like there's this why that's anger, but I'm able to now look at it and compartmentalize it and say, okay, that's still going to be there, but I can't continually orient myself towards that. I have to find something else. And so I'm kind of in the midst of that. What's sort of a different way of looking at that why, if that makes sense. But I am curious for those out there, especially with what's happened in the last few years, if you've almost had to force yourself to change your why just simply because emotionally it wasn't sustainable for you. If you have a feeling, a lot of folks out there who maybe work in nonprofits can experience that kind of burnout. So it's an ever evolving thing.
Definitely. And I think when you're talking about like anger, I think I've definitely like felt that at times. I think another emotion could be like anxiety. And it's like, maybe anxiety is the reason you get started on something, but does that need to be your why? Or can you spin that more positively of like, what led me here is not going to always be the sort of spirit with which I embark on this endeavor. So I definitely like totally relate to what you're saying. And we actually do have an audience question, Claire. Someone is actually wondering, what are ways to identify like the correct goals to set for yourself? So I think we're kind of talking about that right now, but are there any sort of questions one could ask themselves or methodologies that people could use when just setting those goals up?
I mean, that is such a personal question. I think before you start setting any kind of goals in a vacuum, in the sense of here are my career goals or here are my money goals, take a step back and look holistically at the life that you want to lead. Okay. Even from something like, what time do you like to wake up in the morning, right? Structuring your days. Because that you may think I have a certain goal, right? Because it sounds good. But when you really examine it, the consequences of that goal, what it's going to take to reach it, maybe doesn't fit with how you actually want to lead your life, right? And maybe those goals came from somebody else, that you've now absorbed. It's a should, okay? So there's also, so again, don't jump into, the big stuff yet. Really look at like, how do I want to lead my life? And these things need to be put together, right? Like your career goals are going to fit in with your financial goals, and that's going to fit into your, relationship goals and personal goals, because in every choice that you make, there's going to be a consequence for it. So again, before you start just running pell-mell towards a goal, really look sort of in a 360 way. How does this impact each, sort of avenue, aspect of your life? And then I would say, it's projecting, I think it's about the impact that you want to have, the impact on your family, your community, your like the larger community, and how important the legacy that you want to lead, or the legacy you want to leave, excuse me. I mean, I tend to work backwards from a very morbid place. If I were, to be hit by a car tomorrow, God forbid, do I stand by the choices that I made today? And perhaps that means, saying yes to something, or maybe it's saying no to something. So perhaps start with am I going to be hit by a bus tomorrow? And we can go from there.
I was not expecting that answer, but I love it. What is the legacy that you're leaving? So thank you so much. I'm sure the audience really appreciates that advice. Now, I think we talked a bit about goal setting, but I love this question. Is there a system for following through on goals that works for everyone? Are there different strategies depending on the type of individual we're talking about? And can you just kind of explain that piece of not only setting goals, but making sure that you're on track to achieve them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, personal, definitely not one size fits all. And that's something as you read books or download apps, that are, should be helping you with this stuff. If you feel like it's just not working, or there's a difference, I think, between something being like challenging because there's a learning curve and something that's difficult because it's, you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So, just because this is the suggestion from a certain person, if it's not working for you, just take a piece of it and maybe cobble it together with something else that you've read that works for you. For me, I love this app. It's called Todoist. So like to do, ist.com. I find that to be the best possible place as a framework to, hold yourself account, understand all the to-dos, hold yourself accountable, which of course then will, increase the chances that you'll follow through and actually reach these goals. So even though everybody should have a different, way of, filtering through, I think the universal is you need a system to take everything that you're working on and to put it somewhere, because otherwise it's going to always be running in the back of your brain, like a computer processor, whether you are actively thinking about your to-dos or subconsciously, emotionally, you're agitated by it. So have everything in a certain place. Okay. And I'm going to just go off on a tangent a little bit about organizing your to-dos. And then you tell me if, to slow down or to be more specific if you need me to. So in thinking about everything you're working on, your projects, I want you to spend a really long time writing out every single thing, every action that it takes to accomplish this goal. I use Todoist because it's a nice little web where you have buckets of projects and then, these tree trunk, right? You do one thing, and then you realize, hold on, to actually accomplish this quote one thing, it's going to take 3 more tasks, right? Like saying design a social asset. Well, maybe that means you need to get the logo first from a certain person, right? And it's when you start to detail out every single thing that goes into accomplishing something, you realize that we rely on other people a lot more than we realize. Okay. This is why we also tend to underestimate how long something takes. Okay. Because it requires collaboration with other people, or it requires a learning curve. I mentioned that before, right? And we don't give ourselves sort of enough grace space to see that, yeah, it could take time to do this because you've just never done it before. Okay. So it's in mapping all that out, you'll really get a sense of how long things will take. Then I want you to also really think about the energy that it takes. And I find that we tend to do things in a couple of different buckets, defined buckets. Either it's creative, right? It's going to require a lot of thought. It's going to require a lot of like heads down, tedious execution. Okay, or it's going to require a lot of planning. Oftentimes, a lot of what we're doing is actually just like more planning, more collecting, more communication. Right. So knowing kind of what you're doing and, the context in which you're doing it and the energy, then you can take a step back and go, all right, what are my priorities here? Right. And that's a whole other system of figuring out your priorities. Please, before you determine your own priorities, make sure you're on the same page about whoever, whether it's your boss or somebody else who's expecting to hear from you. Like, do they agree? Right. How do they define and measure success? And are you on the same page about your priorities so that you don't need to worry? Like, again, none of this should be in your head anymore. It should all be in a system that hasn't been, shared and agreed upon. And my last piece here, and again, I teach a whole class on this and I tend to go like right into my class. So hopefully I'm speaking to what you've asked. But lastly is I like to batch my days and the days of the week, and also within a certain day, I batch it based on energy, task, and then the priority. So even just looking at, I lose energy after every 3.5, 4 hours. So I don't force myself to work longer than that. I make sure that I have a break and that I do my creative work in the morning because that's when I'm most, sort of stimulated. And I have those tasks there because I've mapped it all out and I see it. Right. And knowing that, 2 hours of tedious work midday, right? Then I take a break and then 1 hour of emailing and I put an away message up. Right. So point being, it's a system. It's a system that is always the same in terms of the buckets, but I rearrange what's happening every week. I actually review it every morning and at the end of every day. and I adjust as necessary. That also allows me to sort of drop things if need be, if there's an emergency, but I don't have to feel kind of lost and overwhelmed. I can easily get back into the groove again, because everything has been put into some system. So I can't say what that is for everybody, but it all does begin with sort of how you work, understanding how you best operate, and not letting anybody else prescribe that to you. Because again, there's so many books and apps out there that even that can feel overwhelming.
Well, thank you so much, Claire. I certainly will be checking out Todoist myself. And we actually did have an audience question that I think is related to sort of like where you were going in that answer. Someone, Ebony, actually in the audience asked, when you're setting goals, like how do you overcome the hustle mentality, which I believe is speaking to like overexerting yourself because you want to get something done. And I think you talked about like batching your days, ensuring you're working when you are most creative. But are there any other strategies you want to share with the audience about making sure, you know, as women, sometimes also our mental capacity sort of is the last priority? How do you match that with sort of the goal setting and achievements?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, oftentimes.
Often.
And I mean, we're socialized to accommodate others. So it's like you may just not have time at the end of the day because, you know, maybe this is actually a question of you need to set boundaries. So oftentimes it's not so much about the goal setting as it is, can you create space in your life, you know, for and the goal, and things may fall into place. You just needed to have, you know, told somebody, excuse me, I have an away message up and I'm not going to respond to you. I love away messages. Which by the way, I've inspired other people when I say I'm focusing on my book or I'm focusing on this, you know, and then they'll write me back, you know, and say, actually, I'm now going to put up an away message telling people what I'm working on. So here's the thing. The hustle, it's like, again, always like, why? What's the purpose? Who does this serve? And if you're not getting much out of it, like if this is kind of just making your life hell, what's the point? You know, your happiness, health, sanity, sleep, most important thing. Okay. So first, there's got to be that. There also, you know, I think again, it goes back to, this is going to sound very contradictory, and I would have said something, my answer would have been very different, I think, pre-pandemic to now. Care deeply and then just stop caring. Okay. So it's like, give yourself, I'm going to really care for these hours. And then I'm turning off my laptop and I am literally, I don't give a shit about my work. Like do whatever it is that you need to tell yourself, but you have to have some separation. You just do, which can be hard, especially if you love what you do for a living. If you in large part align, you know, sort of who you are with what you do, right? You work with purpose. Well, that's scary because then your identity, your sense of self and self-esteem is going to be wrapped up in your output, your ability to reach your goals, right? What your, you know, the success is, which oftentimes requires other people, you know, how they feel about you. So it is a back and forth where you like hustle and give a shit. And then you go, and now I'm going to stop. I am bigger than this. Me, Claire Wasserman, is not fully ladies get paid. Okay. So that is a personal practice for yourself. But that's why I really challenge you is like find ways to care less.
I think sometimes it is just like you put so much into a goal or into work that the only way to stay sane is to disconnect. But I think we have time for one more question. And interestingly, the one from the audience is pretty much the same as the one I had left for you, Claire, which is it okay to give up on your goals or your dreams at any point of your life, even when it's going against your plan? And I think the way I had phrased it was just like, how do you know the time has come to let a goal go? What's the methodology there?
It's interesting. Anytime I get asked a question, my first response is, do you think you might know the answer already? You know, to your own question. I think getting into a habit of learning how to listen to and trust your inner voice is so important because it sounds like there might be some instinct here. And instinct is really interesting. It's showing you a lot. So figuring out like, how are you going to get into the practice of, again, listening to and trusting your inner voice? And that could be starting a meditation practice every day, you know, journaling, etc. Right. So I always want, you know, sort of in the background of all of this, learning how to listen to your own voice may ultimately give you the answer, you know, a better answer than I could give you. Okay. Then again, it's reevaluating holistically lifestyle. Like, what is this, you know, my dream? Well, what for? You know, and can I achieve this through a different means, right? So, you know, when I was younger, like high school, college, whatever, wanted to be an actress, wanted to be in film. Well, I still do that, but in a different way. I do it through performing in this capacity, right? I do it, storytelling. That was my huge motivation for film. Well, the Ladies Get Paid book, it's all told through the stories of other women, right? So it might not be, quote, it might be letting go of this idea in this iteration, but maybe there's a different way that it can be expressed or pursued. So I would, before you just nothing is throwing anything away. I mean, it's giving you information that you then can take with you and make it work. So that's, not knowing more about your situation. I would just challenge you to say, what are the elements of this that can be pursued or expressed in a different way? Is that possible? And do you need to learn from somebody else? Like, let's say you have an idea for a startup and you've been going for it and it's just not working. That's something that happened to me, right? I then realized I needed to go work for another person's startup to learn. Okay. And I was essentially being paid to learn. That's what's sort of nice about working for somebody else, right? It's kind of like going to school, being paid to go to school. So I would never look at anything as, giving up. It's just information that's now showing you perhaps a different direction, and things will, you hustle forward, but you also observe and let things unfold. And if you're building relationships with people that you admire and who can give you kind of, they can share their life story and how they sort of pivoted through things, that should hopefully encourage you that, again, nothing is quote giving up. It's just, being expressed in a different way.
Definitely. It's like, people say the only constant in life is change. I think that's probably true of us as people, and it's true of our goals. So of course we'd have to reevaluate them at some point, but I can see the audience wanted to get the link to your tool that you were talking about. I can see you shared that. Thank you so much, Claire. And we're actually already at time. So I just want to thank you on behalf of Power to Fly, myself, and I think the audience as well for being here, and also thank the audience. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mariella, unless you want to end on anything, Claire.
Just come check us out, ladiesgetpaid.com. We've got a great community of 100,000 women all over the world. Ladiesgetpaid.com/book. And you can follow us on social at Ladies Get Paid, and follow me on social, Claire Gets Paid. I do respond to DMs. I love to hear from people that, y'all remind me of my why. And just know that this is all really hard. All of this is hard. We're all struggling. I guarantee you. So yes, I teach a class. Yes, I'm here today. But you know what? I recently hired an accountability coach because I need somebody else to hold me to task here. So I'm right in the same boat with you all, and excited to see what everybody does next. And thank you so much, Power to Fly, for having me.